Good day and thank you for joining CivilNet. My guest today is Sassoon Grigorian and we'll be discussing his book, Smart Nation, a blueprint for modern Armenia. Thank you for being our guest today. About your book, I've read so much about it, and today I finally got to have the book, and the presentation is later in a couple of hours in Yerevan. Well, I'd like to ask you in person to describe why you thought to write this book with its particular content, and who's the audience?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Thank you for having me. So, I have come to Armenia quite regularly this past decade, and one of the questions that people might ask is, well, who are you to write about how Armenia should look forward coming from Australia? And that's a fair question. But we are a small nation. We have to think about how we can best utilise our resources. And as Rupen Vartanyan said recently, we have a collective responsibility to make Armenia prosperous. So with my background is public policy. I've worked for a number of American multinational companies.
Yes, I saw eBay and yes. PayPal and Microsoft as
That's
well.
right, and I've been looking at Armenia from a global context. How can Armenia further become more prosperous, looking at global examples and looking at other examples of other small nation states. So I had this idea and decided to write a book about it with concrete and specific recommendations.
So your recommendations really, it's like Estonia, Singapore, Israel, it's small nations like Armenia that you find that Armenia has similar potential to prosper. So what are our chances, given also that we are very specific, in a very specific location geographically, and our history is...
Yes. Well, I mean, every country has got its own unique characteristics. Armenia has its own characteristics. It's an old civilization, it has blockaded borders. But what I'd like to do is look at other small nation states who have been successful. And you mentioned a couple of them, Israel, Estonia and Singapore. I mean, take Israel, for example. Despite being a small nation, granted it's had independence for a lot longer period than Armenia has in 25 years, but it is recognised as a global leader in cyber security technology. It's recognised as a leader. Look at Estonia, a country again, not as much Soviet influence, but 25 years of independence. It's already recognised as a world leader in electronic government services delivery. We have this capability in Armenia. We are a smart nation. We have a literate population. We're champions in chess around the world, and Armenians have been credited of making all sorts of inventions and innovations. ATM machines, CT scanner, you name it, Armenians have invented it. We have this capability of being a world leader in some form of technology or another field, but we have to dig deep and find out what is our area of specialisation, and not just be good at it, but be world leaders at it.
So it's kind of a projection of what Armenia could be, but also, in my opinion, Armenia is doing great in IT, as everyone knows, and we keep repeating it and talking about it and being very proud of it. However, to be like Estonia or like Israel, which is something that's being discussed elaborately in Armenia recently, so many conferences and so many guests from Israel, and this like exchange of practice. But to be like that, I think to transfer the innovation in the IT sector to governance, yes, as is the case of Estonia, I think there are a lot of missing links. Do you see that? Do you talk about that?
Yeah, our technology is good, but we can always do better. One of the things that's often talked about is, what is our plan in this space? Like, we need to set up some form of innovation and technology council with a dedicated plan, with timelines, with clear responsibilities. Now, the government here, there is an Information Technology Development Council, which I think is chaired by the Prime Minister at the moment, but we need to think more broadly. We need to think beyond government, and we need to also bring global business leaders to be part of this council. It's not unheard of. I mean, Singapore has a Research and Innovation Council, and they bring in global business leaders to help propel Singapore forward. And they appoint these business leaders on 2-year terms. These are experts, world-recognised experts. Armenia should do the same. We should get global experts here to have a vested interest in Armenia being an innovation power. And we need to think regionally and globally, not just within this market and within this economy. We can be a regional hub for all sorts of things. And another area that I've talked about is establishing innovation district in Yerevan. There are 80 or so innovation districts around the world. Boston's one of them. They have a large cluster of biotechnology. An innovation district is a district where it has a lot of urban planning, it has good access to public transport, it has abundant Wi-Fi, and it becomes a centre for collaboration with universities and the private sector. But more importantly, it becomes a district where you can bring in investment, dedicated investment. Now, Yerevan as a city has that capability. If you look at the abundance of Wi-Fi, access to public transport, you have a lot of these companies within a small confined area. Armenia can do this, and that would also help propel the innovation space, the technology space even further.
So do we have the issue of proving our potential as innovators to the world, or is that something we should work towards, or that's already a known fact?
I think we're known as a good place for outsourcing, for digital skills. There's a lot of success stories coming out of Armenia.
Well, my question was, is that enough to be in the higher ranks of let's just go to Armenia because it's a gold mine of such things, or Armenia is okay but it's nearing the end of its potential? I worry about this sometimes.
Armenia needs a narrative to know what it's a world leader in technology. We shouldn't be satisfied that saying we have some of these success stories, we have a skilled population base, which we do, we have an innovative culture, but we don't have a narrative that we're known in the world over that Armenia is the best in this type of technology or wherever it might be, just like Israel is in terms of cyber security technology or Estonia for e-government services. Armenia needs to find that narrative, double down on its investment and be recognised globally for that.
Who and how do we find that narrative?
Well, I think
how do we pinpoint that?
Well, we need to know what we're good at. I mean, if you look at all the different technology services springing up at the moment, we have issues of data analytics. There's a lot of companies investing into artificial intelligence. I know there's some work going around here in terms of blockchain technology and how to use that. Internet of Things, like when you use a product now, the value of the product is not the product itself, it's the software in the product. So this is a huge industry happening in all these sorts of areas, and we need to find out what is our specialised area of advantage and invest in that. Israel managed to do global cybersecurity because a lot of the people who formed these companies used to be part of the Israeli Defence Force.
So
there's a natural area of specialisation
for that. In Armenia's case, who's the person who just surfaced that potential, or the organization, or is that something that happens organically?
Well, I think it's a council. If this Innovation and Technology Council is formed, and if you bring global business leaders in, you can then start investigating what is Armenia's natural area of expertise. I can't give you that answer. I mean, there is a whole lot of skill in this country, but I don't think we as a country know what is our natural area of advantage that we can exploit.
We need to study that.
We need to study that, and then start investing in that.
You talk also about urgency, and maybe I'd like to learn more about that sense of urgency that you mentioned that is lacking in Armenia.
Yeah, I talk about this in the book in terms of a sense of urgency, in the sense that urgency shouldn't be equated to rushing. If you go to other global cities or other large cities, people are often walking quite deliberately with a sense of purpose. And people have to deliver something by a certain deadline or timelines, and they realise what they're doing is going to meet this end goal by this period of time. You get the sense when you're in Armenia, for all sorts of different reasons, and I think mainly cultural reasons, there isn't that level of urgency existing, and that applies to government decision making and also more generally to the population. I think the example I brought up was in the morning, why things here operate a bit later in the morning, but they also close a bit later at night. But that said, there seems to be a lack of urgency. You have urgency when you have a sense of purpose, when you have a sense you have to meet a certain goal by a certain period of time.
How about long-term planning? Is that something Armenia is lacking, or we're not aware that there are long-term plans generally in organizing the country?
I think sometimes it's difficult to do long-term plans here because of the political and security situation, particularly with Karabakh. There are a lot of immediate issues in Armenia, whether it's the poverty issue or economical issue or day-to-day issues, which sometimes focusing on that will mean you're not focusing on more the longer-term issues. There needs to be longer-term planning, but it's understandable why there might not be as much because of the situation Armenia is in currently.
So going back to the sense of urgency, and this is more of a subjective, personal question, is like it says that here Armenia's democracy is new, its heritage is ancient, and it has always survived. Now it's time for Armenia to prosper. Yes. And this is something that I worry about sometimes. We have always survived, and we take that for granted a little bit. Older, smarter nations have disappeared, and we don't have that guarantee that Armenia will not disappear now just because it didn't disappear 2,000 years ago. So and we don't have that sense of urgency regarding this issue. We never discuss if our existence as a nation is in jeopardy or not. So what's your take on this?
I think Rupen Vartan had a very good quote in relation to this, and he said something along these lines, is that if you have a survival mode or a victim mentality mode, which we may have in relation to genocide-related issues, you have a limited thought capacity and then you're not open to big ideas. If you think in a survival mode, you're not going to be open or thinking about big ideas. We need big ideas to propel Armenia forward. And what I mean by big ideas is that you might aim to reach at this level, but even if you get to this level and you don't reach that goal, you're better than where you started from. We need to overreach. We need to not only have higher expectations, we need to have specific expectations, what that might be. And I think this is, also, it's all cultural. We need to look beyond survival and think big. Because if we think survival, we're not going to, we're just going to be thinking about the here and now.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the viewers for joining us. So A Smart Nation, a blueprint for modern Armenia. It's available in English, but I hear it's going to be translated into Armenia hopefully soon. And I also like the design very much. I read a little bit about it. It's a blueprint with the coat of Armenian coat of arms and
binary code.
And binary code. Yeah. That's very interesting. And again, thank you for joining us.